Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grace and Truth Podcast. My name's Taylor Bacon. I'm the Associate Pastor at Grace Resurrection Methodist Church.
And I'm James Williams, Senior Pastor.
And in this week's episode, we are talking about Sabbath and the spiritual power of actually stopping. So let's dive into this week's conversation. So needless to say, well, I can't say needless to say, but needless to say to you, James, I am very excited about this conversation.
I thought you would be.
Well, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, but it's one of the things I'm the worst at practicing.
Yeah.
But it's like it's my heart's and like desire to be really good at this because I know people who are really good at it, and they just, in some regards, are the kind of people that I want to be.
Absolutely.
So we're good Methodists, and we'd love to say that John Wesley invented the Sabbath, but it's not true. Actually, I don't know that he really talks about it directly.
No, but
I can't say hardly at all, but I mean, I've read a lot of his stuff, sermons, journal entries, and but I think his life reflected a Sabbath cadence.
He did not. I've read most of his journals, not all of them, but most of them. He did not talk about it a whole lot, but the references he made throughout his life tells me, I think he was probably pretty good at it. I think he was probably, I think he would have been very regimented in it.
Yeah. And not, you say regimented. And so I want to kind of come out of the gate and say, not in terms of, this is not something we're recommending you do in a legalistic way, because I think honestly, if you're doing it just for the sake of, okay, I have to do this, I think you're robbing yourself of the experience.
I totally agree.
Of Sabbath. Because, one of my favorite concepts, and there's a couple of different ways this is described across different theological spectrums and whatnot, but my favorite is the thin space, where heaven and earth get closer together. Your experience of heaven and earth, that new heaven and new earth coming together, that's what Sabbath is.
It is.
It's a chance for us to taste eternity.
And it's also, and I'm amazed by Christians who don't understand that it's the sole reason we were created. It was worship. And when we don't do anything else on our Sabbath, we are totally focused on the worship of God, even in those quiet moments. So it is the whole reason we were created. Everything else is just stuff.
Before we started recording, we were just talking about my generation being, so like, you could consider me either a really young millennial or a really old Gen Z. It just kind of depends. My birth year is split between the two generations. It just depends on who you ask. But we were kind of talking about how some people in my generation are really good at balancing their lives and their work and their families and all of that. But I gave a couple of examples that I think there are still people who are just so sucked into the hustle culture that just think if I could just close one more deal, if I could just make partner, if I could, et cetera, then I'll be good. But it's the whole 10% more. How much do you need? 10% more. It's always 10% more.
Yes.
So I think that this is a conversation for our cultural moment. So to kind of kick that off, what I want to walk through is, why is it good for us to stop? Why can't people stop? And then some practical stuff. But I said all that to say that even in a hustle culture, God works for 6 days out of the week.
That's right.
He's just asking you to stop for one. But for some reason, 24 hours feels eternal. So why do you think that is? Why can't people, not just people in my generation, but across all generations, why can't people stop?
Well, I think for what you just said, there are so many hours in the day that the average person in Western civilization thinks they need. And 24 is usually not enough, especially for people who are on career tracks, for sure, because you get promoted, good things happen when you you don't even have to really be working hard. You just have to appear to work hard, which is kind of crazy, but that's our culture. And like in China, in some of the Asian countries, the people that do well are the people who actually work the hardest. They have parameters and metrics for that. But in America, we just kind of roll with the punches. And if we do it long enough and we're visible enough, you can really
It's all perception.
move forward.
Perception is king in terms of the hustle culture. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just look like you're working hard enough, which is a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure.
Well, it is. It is.
Because you're keeping up almost somewhat of a facade.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the problem, though. And that's why I think we just feel like we can never be viewed as not doing anything, and that we have to be in constant motion and proactive. And now, not everybody's that way, but a lot of people in our society are. And Sabbath can be seen as a hindrance to that. Now, the Christians probably would never say it, but that's the way we treat it. We treat it like it's a hindrance, because I know I have to really try hard not to do things on my Sabbath. It's really hard for me, very hard for me. And I've been good and bad at it throughout my life. It's been, it goes in cycles. Right now, I'm pretty good at it. And probably I'd say the last 5 years, I've been better than I've ever been at it. But I still struggle with it. And I still have days that I don't do it well. And I don't know if I've told this story. As I get older, I tell the same stories a lot, but I don't know if I've told you this story. You know Matthew Sleeth. And of course, he wrote a book called 24/6. And I would highly recommend that book. He's a dear friend of mine, and he wrote a book on Sabbath, which there aren't many practical books out there, I don't think. And so he would come, especially that last year of where I was in my last church, I was really kind of struggling with what was going to happen in the future. And on the outside, everything looked great. I mean, everybody would have said he's going to retire here, as you know. But behind the scenes, I was struggling. My leaders were struggling. It was just I was thinking, okay, God, you got to do something here. I know I'm not going to be here much longer, but I don't know how that's going to look. And so I was dealing with a lot of stuff. And Matthew and I we'd get together once in a while and just talk. And we'd spend no less than 2 hours together sometimes. But I remember one particular conversation where he and I were just really talking through some of those things. Because he had been a physician who put his career to the side so that he could be an author, because his books just started selling like hotcakes. And now that's all he does. And then he had founded a creation care ministry called Blessed Earth. But I'll never forget that day, because we almost always ended with me praying for him. And that day, he said, I want to pray for you. And so we did. And he prayed this beautiful prayer. And in the middle of it, he started to weep in the middle of the prayer. And when he said, amen, he looked up at me. I'll never forget this. He looked up at me and he said, James, this church, they will give you a raise if you break one of the commandments, but they will fire you if you break 9 of them. And I was intently listening, and he said, you break 9, you're probably not going to have a job anymore. But if you break that one, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, they'll give you a raise. And I thought, that's interesting. And it was true in my ministry. It was true. I worked like a banshee. The church was my life. And you remember when I left that congregation, when I had that last statement I made to the church, I said, I've been married to the church. I have been married to the church, and it was wrong, and I've neglected my family. Because I knew that I was going to take a little time before I did anything else. And so it's a serious thing. It's a serious thing. Now, my children are very grace-filled, and they would say, oh, Dad, you did all right. You spent time with, and I was at a lot of things, but I was also not at a lot of things. If they had something like a play, or my daughter was real into theater when she was younger, so I'd make all those. My son was basically a track star. I mean, he was a great track and field athlete. I didn't miss those, but at home, I missed a lot with them. Basically, there were times in my ministry when Natalie was just a single parent. And the reason is because I did not keep Sabbath. because Sabbath not only would have been a day that I gave them that time and to be with them, but it also would have informed the rest of my life if I was keeping Sabbath. And I wasn't. And I was juggling lots of balls, and eventually you're going to drop one. And I did. So I think, Taylor, the biggest thing that Christians can learn, probably one of the primary things, if you ask the average Christian, especially in the Bible Belt like we're in, they're going to say, what makes you a great Christian? They're going to give you some moralistic reason that you are a good. This is the mark of a good Christian. I believe a true Christ follower understands Sabbath and observes it consistently. Mm-hmm. I really believe that.
Yeah, and I think at the crux of this idea of why can't we stop, there are two quotes that come to my mind. One's by John Mark Comer, one's by Pete Scazzaro. Mm-hmm. So Comer says that Sabbath is really about trust, and he says this: you trust that the world won't fall apart if you're not controlling it, which good. I think is spot on. I think a lot of our anxiety and worry comes out of a lack of control. So I think we're worried to stop because we won't have control in those 24 hours. And when I first started stopping, I thought, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What? And then when I finally did try to stop, it didn't happen, and I thought, oh, the world can go without me for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then Pete Scazzaro, actually, in his book, Emotionally Healthy, it's either leadership. I think it's leadership.
I think the one's leadership and one's emotionally healthy church.
Yeah, he's got church, leadership, spirituality, all of that. But in his leadership one, he says that most pastors and leaders, but really pastors, are afraid to stop because they're afraid of what they'll see or find when they do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good segue into kind of the next, Sabbath, when you do, or stopping, really, we're not even at the Sabbath part yet, but when you stop, you might be confronted with a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, a lot of feelings you haven't felt before. You'll also see your blind spots. You'll see blind spots. So
and here's what, and I think that's an important point, Taylor. I don't want to leave that point too quickly because I think Sabbath is probably a lot like your Sabbath life is a lot like your prayer life. And on Sabbath, you don't necessarily pray all day, but your Sabbath life and your prayer life are very similar in that both only happen well when you're not afraid of intimacy because they're both very intimate things.
Yeah.
A good prayer life and observation of the Sabbath day, it's very intimate. Mm-hmm. And there were times in my life that I really struggled with that for lots of reasons. But once I understood that, I really got better because I didn't want to be that close to anybody. So that affected how close I was to God because I've always been pretty independent and just kind of out there by myself. And I was happy with that. And I finally had to come to terms with the fact that I need people. Now, when I decided to do that differently, it didn't always go well because I wasn't good at it. But I did understand that intimacy was the key to a good relationship with your Father, your Heavenly Father, and the fact that you can get on your knees, and when you confess your sins and when you cry out to God and when you petition God to almost a state of begging because you're desperate to figure out what's going on inside of me, that's an intimate thing. And you have to break through it. You have to break through it in order to really know the true Christ. And I'm not bragging here because I've not been good at it for most years of my life, but I'm so much better than I've ever been right now, and it makes a difference. And you said something to me that would have insulted me early in my ministry, but you said something to me not long ago that was a very high compliment to me and told me I am really moving in that direction. And you said to me, because you've worked with me in 2 different places now, and you said, I notice you move a lot slower now. And, my early days of ministry, that would have been an insult.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything slow. How dare you say that? But I made a lot of mistakes because of that too. Not any terrible mistakes like pastors can make, because pastors can ruin their lives when they don't have Sabbath. Bishop Davis told me something one time. He was bishop in Kentucky Conference. I was on his cabinet. He was here for 17 years. This was the fastest growing conference for the United Methodist Church in America when he was here. He's a great leader, wonderful man from Kentucky. And he said to me one time, James, as I've seen pastors have to be taken out of ministry, often they did something that they shouldn't have done. So they lost their credentials or they were taken out of their church. And he said often they would do those things on purpose because they didn't have enough courage to step back from ministry. They didn't have enough courage to say, I need some time away. I need to work on some things. So they would do something wrong almost subconsciously because they knew that then it would be done for them. And I've never forgotten that, because as I look over friends and other colleagues who've had real difficult things happen in ministry, that was almost always the case. They were isolated. They were not taking their Sabbath. And it's the same with lay people. We get into these modes of work and we forget about spending the time we need to spend with the Lord. And we do things that we would not normally do under other circumstances. So it's really dangerous not to observe the Sabbath.
Yeah, and kind of what I'm hearing from you is that Sabbath can become in and of itself a bodily prayer.
Yeah.
That ultimately just says, God, I trust you. And so let's wind down into what this can actually look like. So the idea of Sabbath.
Why do you think we don't trust God?
Why do I think we don't trust God?
Yeah.
I think you nailed it. I think we're scared of intimacy.
No.
I think we don't trust God because we can't see him, we can't touch him, we can't audibly hear him. Like there's so many intangibles, and ultimately we're not in control. So it's a mix of fear of intimacy, lack of control, invisibility. I mean, it depends on who you are and your personality type, but there's a lack of a lot when it comes to God that can only be filled by stopping, trusting, and resting.
I've never seen a happy or genuinely joy-filled person who only depended on their brain and never depended on their heart. Benjamin Franklin said to George Whitefield one time, because George Whitefield really wanted to see him convert to Christianity and to be a Christ follower, and Ben Franklin had no interest in that. And he famously said to George Whitefield, intelligent people don't submit to a God that they can't see. And that's a very intellectual statement to make. And of course, we know he did some great things and we remember him for that, but he was a very sad person and ended up dying of syphilis, actually. And so often when I encounter people who are very cerebral and won't go to that heart level with God, they may be rich, they may have lots of friendships, they may be able to travel the world, but they're not genuinely happy because they haven't understood that heart connection that has to be there with God as Christ followers. So this is a very important conversation we're having right now, because I think that somebody is listening to this who needs to hear it and who needs to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, what am I really doing here? Because I can tell you this, now this is going to make me sound really old, but when your children leave your home and go out on their own for the first time, and I'm talking to married people here, you look at each other, and if you've not spent that time with God and time building those relationships that are right there in your home, you look at each other sometimes and are like, now, who are you again?
Yeah.
You forget who each other is because you've spent so much time doing other things. And when the kids are gone, it becomes a glaring reality that we don't even know who we are now. We're not parents anymore. So who are we? And that happens when you don't spend time with Sabbath, because the more you spend time with Sabbath, the closer you're going to get to those who are closest to you and more intimate. It just is automatic.
Yeah.
You can't do Sabbath well and not have close relationships with the people that are closest to you in your own home. I've talked about Bonnie Crandall a lot on this podcast. She's no longer a counselor. She's retired now, but I was with her for many years, and she's not only is she a great person, but she's a great counselor. She said to me one time in the middle of all the stuff that I was trying to figure out, she said, James, you need to learn to spend most of your time with the people that are going to be standing around your deathbed. And that hit me right between the eyes. I mean, I'd never thought of it that way. She was like, all these people that you give 100% of your time to, When you're on your deathbed, they're going to be nowhere to be found. You need to spend time with the people who are going to be standing around your deathbed and build those relationships. And Sabbath will help you do that, I found.
Yeah.
I'm talking a lot, but it's a
good.
big one. It's a big one.
Let's shift into what a modern Sabbath can actually look like. And I say modern Sabbath versus one we might find in Scripture, because there are a lot of things in Scripture that are instructed to do on the Sabbath that just don't apply anymore.
Yes.
A lot of rules on temple worship and a lot and sacrifices and
Yep.
don't kindle a flame and all
Thank
sorts
God
of
for
things.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so what a modern Sabbath actually looks like, there are a couple things I want to work through. One, it doesn't have to be Sunday. It
That's
just
right.
has to be the day of the week that you typically don't work in your vocational setting.
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
So like for people in our line of work as pastors, Sunday can't be Sabbath.
It's a work day.
It's a work day.
Yeah.
And so maybe we do follow a more traditional Sabbath in terms of when, because we do it from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown.
Yes.
And that way we kind of plug back in Saturday evening, get ready for Sunday. And this is just what I'm saying. This is just what I do. Especially like if I'm preaching on a Sunday, then I want to come back online around when my kids go to bed around 8:00.
Yeah.
And then I can look at my sermon for the next day for a couple hours, just kind of prep for Sunday, right?
Yeah.
If you work on Sunday, and I've only done church work, so I don't know what other jobs or careers work on Sundays, but
Well, I mean, all retail,
there's a lot.
restaurants. I mean, so many.
In the public sector, like all of that. So if that just pick a day of the week that is consistently your off day,
Yeah.
and make that your Sabbath. Now, that's not going to affect a large majority of you, because a large majority of you are either, at least that I know listening, either retired or work a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, which would mean that Sunday could be your Sabbath. But
Yeah.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to kind of give permission. If you work Sundays, it doesn't give you permission to skip the Sabbath. It gives you permission to find another day. And the second thing is that work is broader than your job, than what you're paid for, or if you're retired, than what you're spending a majority of your time doing.
Yes.
Work is work. I mean, work is you are suspending lawn care, dishes, chores, housework, yard work, errands, anything that you do on a regular basis, you should not be doing on the Sabbath.
That's right.
The best way that was ever put for me is, and again, this applies more so to people who have 9 to 5s, but you have 2 days in a weekend.
Yeah.
We typically treat both of those as days off, which means we run errands, we do yard work, we do house chores, all of that. And we do that across 2 days. We're asking that you do all of that in one day of your weekend. Have one off day and then have one Sabbath.
Yes.
If that's the only thing you take away from this, and that's the only shift that you make, you're miles ahead of most people.
Absolutely.
Just make one shift. Just say, hey, on my weekend, Saturday is going to be my off day. So that's when I'm going to run my errands. That's when I'm going to do my yard work. That's when I'm going to do my chores. Sunday is my Sabbath.
Yes.
And the last point that I'll make is, if you have young kids, I'm sorry, but you don't get a Sabbath. No, actually, that's a joke. But Sabbath is hard with young kids. Trust me, I have a 1 and a 3-year-old right now, and it frustrated me so much when I tried to start practicing Sabbath, and they got in the way of it.
Yeah,
literally, I just thought they were in the way. I was like, if
They're
they weren't around, then I could have the most perfect Sabbath. I could sleep in, I could wake up, make a cup of coffee. I could read a book, take a nap, read another book, have a nice dinner. Oh man, that sounds so nice. But then I thought, like you just said, Sabbath is the opportunity for me to get closer to my kids and my wife. So let's work them into this. So I'm just going to lay out practically.
And before you do that, I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
Because the practical stuff is stuff we need to end with. But I want to go back to how you started this podcast. Mm-hmm. I do not want people to miss this. So this is not about legalism. This is not about being legalistic about Sabbath. If you have a Sabbath where it gets kind of messed up, that's fine. Just make sure you do it well next week. Mm-hmm. You got one every week. And if you get legalistic about it, then it becomes work. And that's what you don't want it to be. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to be work. When I was in Israel, our Jewish friends, on Saturdays, you can't do anything because that's the Sabbath. In the hotel that I was in, on Saturdays, they have those elevators programmed, so they just stop at every floor. You're not even allowed to push a button. I didn't know this, but Rabbi Dan next door to us, he and I were talking one day, you're not really even supposed to flip a light switch.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that is a necessary way to follow Sabbath. I think, especially in the New Testament, when you do see all those rules and you're like, well, this is ridiculous, I kind of see those things as just as symbolic. I don't think God's going to be upset if you flip a light on when you walk in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But what it says to me is the small, tedious things that pull us away from our building of our relationship with God are important. And the little things can get in the way of Sabbath. But do not let it be legalistic, because it invalidates the whole point, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the challenge for you this week is pretty simple. Pick one day over the next week, 24 hours. Don't work, don't check your email, don't do anything that you would consider productive, and just rest and celebrate. The framing I like for the Sabbath is what you're allowed to do is to rest, delight, and worship.
That's good.
If you can't consider it rest, delightful, or worship, then you probably shouldn't do it. And I like framing it as that rather than here are all the things you can't do, because that's a bit nebulous. I think it depends on who you are, it depends on your life stage, it depends on what's around you. And then I just want you to notice what happens. Do you get anxious? Are you bored? Is it peaceful? Is it kind of a mix of all three? Like what emotions are you noticing, and where might God be trying to speak into your life through those emotions? So next week is about fasting, and really how absence or choosing to go without becomes a real spiritual teacher. So that's a wrap.
I'm not going to be...
Not a wrap.
Well, I'm just... I don't think I'm going to be there for fasting.
You're not going to be there?
I love food way too much.
Which is great, because we're gonna differentiate between fasting and abstinence, which is a common misconception.
All right,
so
well,
that'll be a good. So we can do both, and you can speak on sort of the going without, and I'll talk about the lack of food thing. So
all right, so when are you going to wrap this thing up? I can tell you how to do everything.
I tried. So. Well, that's a wrap on this week's conversation, but we hope it's been meaningful to you, and we hope that you'll share it with others so that it can be meaningful to them. And as always, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and on our website at graceresurrection.org. And we'd love if you continue to join us each week for our next episodes of the Grace and Truth podcast. But until next time, may the good Lord bless and keep you.
Till we meet again.